Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris and Lance Albertson. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there guys, DMO73 here, bringing you the wacky, zany feature match of the week. We've been out of schedule a little bit, thanks to good old Loki causing lots of mischief. But I am playing the Loki Awakening list that you saw the deck profile for on Wednesday. I'm playing against my friend Kenneth, who is playing his Lucifer discard mid-rangey kind of deck. So the Lucifer deck is pretty similar to the Lucifer discard that we've seen in the past. It's not quite running as much of the end game discard, but it is still running like Faith in the Darkness, Joan d'Arc, stuff like that kind of aggression that comes from darkness. And then the Loki deck is very much very similar, at least in core, like you saw, to the fairy tale machines that were run by a lot of players at Worlds with Loki. The idea being, however, for this deck that we purely focused on just seeing what we could do with Awakening support and fairy tale support rather than relying on the machines. I did say that we did put machines in the sideboard, but unfortunately for this match we didn't end up using them, so you didn't kind of get to see how that worked out. But we'll have to go ahead and see how it goes. I'm going to be on the draw here. Going second, which I don't really mind doing. It kind of sets the tempo of the deck up a little bit weird. If I were to describe the Loki deck, it is kind of a bit of a tempo deck. It's very much how you put this kind of progressive pressure on board while constantly disrupting the flow of your opponents. So it's a lot of combat tricks, a lot of reactions to really disrupt their flow and make them kind of reevaluate their play lines, and kind of say, well, oh, you were trying to play on curve, now I'm going to completely disrupt that, while also having a lot of draw power that comes with blue. So it's been very interesting to try this list out. Going second makes it a little bit weird though, because we don't get to control the curve nearly as much in the early game, but we'll have to see how it goes. So first turn, Skeleton Horde coming down from Kenneth. On my turn, hitting that Dramaturgy, which we talked about before is mainly for the sideboard. Choosing to, knowing that it's a darkness deck, knowing that he's going to 2 will, I'm going to go ahead and use my Energize for Massive Growth, which generates 3 will just for Awakenings. Then I can pay 1 blue and use those 3 to immediately put out a Jormungandr, who will have both of his Awakenings here. So suddenly 4 will, get a 9/9 that has that Gluttony counter, so I can start eating stuff. And I play this because I know I'm not going to try to block. And if he's trying to place, like, he's going to have a hard time trying to kill it, so I don't necessarily really have to worry about it. He plays that Patchwork Frankenstein, which is a free target really for Jormungandr to be able to remove from the game. Swinging in for 9, sacrificing the Gluttony counter to remove the guy from the game. He's going to go block with the Skeleton Horde. And then in response to the Skeleton Horde trigger, I'm going to go ahead and Erendite the trigger so he doesn't get the token. This again is kind of one of that whole, he wanted to try to make his first couple turns have some value, and then very quickly I'm back in control of the tempo here. Having the Distortion of Time that can now just sit in the grave, because we are still a water deck, so there's no reason for us to not at least have Distortion of Time in there, because we might be able to steal a turn here or there as necessary to kind of finish the game off. Paying 2. Playing Ray the Black Owl. Then choosing to pass the turn. Calling a stone. Hitting that Time Stone. Very important for 1, doing the God Art, but also 2, being able to do the Awakening of Dragonsword's Breath. I'm going to go ahead and do Distortion of Time here, and then banish the Water Magic Stone to give myself a Gluttony counter, and then swing in for 9, banishing the Gluttony counter to eat the 0 and remove it from the game and hit him for 9 damage. So with the Distortion of Time here, locking him out of a stone, it essentially kind of just resets me back to exactly where I was. He's not going to get to play any cards, he doesn't get to call a stone, he's only up for me 1 stone, but then when it goes back to my turn, just like I was before, I'll be calling for my 3rd stone. So I just kind of get a nice little reset there, while also getting some stuff on the board and hitting him for a solid amount of damage. Scarecrow coming in Awaken here. It's my primary way to get that Hamlin to the graveyard, which is what I wanted, and then get to swing in for another 9, take him down to 22. And then pass the turn. So in this deck, that's kind of the play you want to make with a Distortion of Time. You really want to use it to really coincide really nicely with the Jormungandr to get a lot of value, especially in the early game. The later game, it doesn't do necessarily as much because your opponent still has a bunch of additional resources, especially potentially against black when I don't already have, when I'm not playing the dinosaurs to be able to kind of back it up. Plays that Look of Corruption, steals the other Jormungandr, then chooses to call Distortion of Time, ripping another 2 cards out of my hand. And since I've already used the God Art, those are essentially dead in the graveyard. There's no way for me to get that back. Just gonna go ahead and use Black Rosario here. Says I don't want to take another 9. I want to get those guys off the board and not have to deal with them. Still taps him out, which for my deck is exactly where I want him to be. I want to be in charge of where the pressure is. Calling for stone, getting that time stone. Now I can set up this Dr. Mermaid into a Gretel. The Dr. Mermaid is to be able to call stone with Loki and then recover it, much in the same way that you would do with Howell Pig. It's kind of an interesting idea. I'm not necessarily sure if I would keep it around after playing this list a little bit. Definitely I think is a card that could be cut, but it has had some value in terms of, especially since you want to be able to flip Loki and do something usually in the same turn. So being able to call the stone before you flip can make things pretty advantageous. Faith in the Darkness coming down after playing that Oborozuki. Looking at the top 5. Does get to see the Joan d'Arc there, which will come in as a 9/7, which is pretty solid, but it can't kill either of my guys this turn, and I'm kind of okay taking the damage. Going down to 31. Calling Stone here, hitting another Dramaturgy. Casting Invitation here. I'm gonna go search for, I can search for any card in my deck, but ultimately what I want to do is grab Dragon's Lord's Breath at this time. I kind of really need to refill my hand. Dragon's Lord's Breath is very interesting when you made use of with Gretel, because the beauty of it is Gretel says whenever you awaken a spell for the first time each turn, you draw a card when that happens. So for 3 will with Dragon's Lord's Breath, I can bounce 2 things and still draw a card without having to do the second awakening because of Gretel, which gets you a lot of value for just 3 will. It replaces itself and removes 2 guys, potentially helps you steal in some damage. Like in this situation, I'm gonna swing in with Dr. Memory, try to hit 4, and then cast that Dragon's Lord's Breath, putting the Oborozuki back in his hand, the Joan d'Arc on the bottom of his deck. I get to draw a card because of the Gretel, and then I get to hit him for 4 and take him down to 18. So just for that amount of, for 1 card, I got a lot of value off of it, and then I'll go ahead and leave the Gretel up because I don't want to waste that draw engine right now, knowing that he does have access to things like Joan d'Arc and things like that. Calls the stone, hits a good Darkness Stone. I see 6 will, and I immediately think Belial, so I kind of start scooping up the cards. He decides that's not really the best play right now, although you do see that he has the Belial in hand. It's kind of one of those situations we talked about on the Teacher's Lounge where you can kind of tell what decks are trying to do and kind of what it might want to do. This is an interesting play here. So plays the Skeleton Horde and then plays the Oborozuki and immediately sacrifices the Skeleton Horde. Plays another Oborozuki and sacks the Skeletal Token, and suddenly has 2 8/8 flyers. So a lot of value out of there, and if he did happen to have a reasonable target to use for the Life-Severing Blade, or if he'd had a Life-Severing Blade in hand, he could also have killed the Gretel here for 1 will, because he had a creature hit the graveyard this turn. Playing another Scarecrow here, the Awakening will let me draw a card, and then Scarecrow lets me draw a card, and I have to discard 1. Can discard another Hamlin to the grave. Looking at the rune deck, I don't really like staring down 2 8/8 flyers. It's a little bit behind where I want to be right now. despite the fact that I am high on life, but I'm kind of having to spend a couple turns setting up for the big control. So I say, you know what, I think I can take one more turn of damage. If I consume one, remove it from the game, I'll gain 8 life. So then if the other one swings, I'm just back to where I was. So again, it's a kind of soft reset in the terms of making it so that I'm not going to be taking as much damage, keeping myself alive, keeping the tempo where I want it to be in terms of where the pressure is. And I'm getting close to the point where if I can, having 2 Hamlins in grave, if I can start getting to a Forest of the Misty Woods or things like that, I can start stealing Kenneth's stuff back to my side of the field kind of on command, at which point in time I'm stealing even more tempo away from him and making him playing cards, meaning that he's actually giving me cards instead. Choosing to play Tears of the Fallen here, making me discard a card at random. Identifying where the ranges are. 6 means a reroll. 2 is that card right there. Makes me discard an Erendite. Looks like he's thinking about whether or not to do Judgment here, just to rip my hand further to shreds. It's probably a pretty good idea in the sense that, like, I'm not really threatening a lot of damage right now. I'm blue, so I probably don't have a way to kill a J-Ruler. It'd be another flyer, but it's the only negative thing is in the fact that, like, blue has a lot of draw power, and I get to choose the cards. So knowing that he's probably going to make me discard here, I can discard the 3 cards that aren't going to really refuel my hand. So I think I discard a Hamlin, a Gretel, and then something else. I already have a Gretel in field. It can't trigger more than once. Choosing not to swing here, which I think is an interesting decision. See, I happen to draw into a Sacred Dragon Lord's Breath, which is really good at this point. Also having that Scarecrow in hand. So getting to draw off of the Gretel, getting to draw off of the Scarecrow, discarding the Jormungandr. Main reason for that is because I saw the Forest of the Misty Woods, which is also going to replace itself and give me a potential other Resonator into my hand. Unfortunately, I whiff and send another Forest of the Misty Woods to the bottom, but now that Misty Woods for 2 will at instant speed whenever I need to can then turn into a Pipe the Hamlin and steal the Oborozuki. So with the Scarecrow that can swing this turn, I'm going to go ahead and swing for 4. Blocks with the Oborozuki, at which point we're going to crack the Forest of the Misty Woods, get to grab the Hamlin and put that into the field, and steal the Oborozuki. So then the damage is going to get to go through, and I'll take him down to 14. And pass the turn there, choosing not to swing with the Dr. Mermaid. Mainly because if he'd get a free block with the Lucifer, and I don't have a way to kill it this turn because of what creatures are on board. So it doesn't make much sense to swing. Being at 6 will now, staring down a massive board of very much lethal next turn. And it does make the decision here to play that Belial. In response to that cast, I'm going to go ahead and make a play that I recognize here I can't actually do. I target the Hamlin here to bounce it back to my hand and then attempt to draw a card. That's not actually possible. So I'm thinking of Shayla's Pathway part being able to bounce it back to my hand. So ignore that. And everything will die. So it would have gone to the graveyard. I take the damage from all of those creatures dying. I do get to draw the extra card thanks to the Awakening. Bouncing and cutting back to my hand. Dragon's Breath only bounces cards of a certain cost. That's a complete misplay on my part. So don't do that. Lessons learned. Calling for stone here. Paying 6 for the Hamlin that I shouldn't have in hand. Taking the Belial. You can't swing this turn. But this is kind of what this deck likes to try to do, being that it will try to Force your opponent to only have one Resonator on the field at a time so that Hamlin always is taking exactly what you want. See, I do have Gretel and a Scarecrow back on the field here. Playing that Dr. Mermaid again. Setting up for potential flip next turn with Loki after being able to call for a stone. Because what I could do next turn with Dr. Mermaid is call stone, recover, pay 1 to play Gretel, flip Loki, pay 1 to do the Awakening of Scarecrow, draw 2 cards, discard, and get all this value off of the fact that Loki will be reducing those Awakening costs. Just have that Life-Severing Blade in hand. Paying 2. Starts to play 2 to play Command of Life and Death, looking at his graveyard. And then realizes that he was doing some things out of order. So we're going to actually take a little bit of a rewind here in just a second. Casts Demon Division instead for those 2. Will gets to go search his deck for anything he wants. Looks like he's going to grab a Skeleton Horde here. The play being there is you cast Skeleton Horde for 1 will, cast the Command of Life and Death, bring back Oborozuki, sacrifice the guy to get the 1/1, make her an 8/8, and then you can use that Life-Severing Blade in hand to kill the Belial. Command of Life and Death getting cast. Getting to go grab the Oborozuki, sacrifices that. He will take 1 damage from this because of the Belial being on board, and a creature went to the graveyard. So we'll go down to 13. And then he can pay 1 more for that Life-Severing Blade and answer the Belial, which is the big threat at this point. At that point in time, passes the turn to me. Calling for stone, hitting that Time Stone. Swinging in for 4 damage. Really ultimately trying to get him to possibly kill it. Thought I could set it up to be another play with that Misty Woods. It says chooses to take the damage, goes down to 9. Playing the Gretel. Choosing not to do the Loki flip this turn. Discarding another Gretel. Paying 6. Hard casting a Hamlet and taking the Oborozuki. Passing the turn there. Plays 1 for a Look of Corruption. Wants to steal that last card out of my hand. It is Fenrir. Paying 3. Jet Black Wings. -6/-6 to my side of the board. And then also a Sandstorm to do another 2 damage here. So kill the Oborozuki and the Dr. Mermaid, just wiping my board there for 3 will. Very solid play from Kenneth here. It's an excellent way to keep my board clear while also clearing my hand. Keeping that Gretel off the board is great, and I've already used my free search off of the invitation. Swing it in, taking me down to 18. So you got that distortion of time. So at least I get to dig a little bit deeper here. Pay 1, cast the distortion. Perform judgment. Pay 3 and play a witch's house. Whole point here being at least let's put a body on board. That can potentially turn into a different body. The Lucifer can swing over top of me because we don't have any flying, so that's not a big deal, but at least I have a body on board to possibly push pressure back. Command of life and death, bringing back the Oborozuki. He has to decide here whether or not he wants to swing with the Lucifer, because ultimately, yes, he will be able to hit me for 8 damage, but Loki can kill Lucifer without having to be killed in return, because she has 12 defense. He has to be careful here, because if I have some way to answer the Oborozuki, like I could potentially block, then I would get to kill Lucifer and the Oborozuki and then still be able to swing in with House. So, paying 4, I get to do the Watchdog here with both Awakenings, forcing him to banish the Oborozuki and drawing myself 2 cards. Reason why is because I get to pay 2 less for each Awakening, so each Awakening costs 2. And then I also had the Mystery Woods off of those 2 cards, which is excellent. Deciding to grab another Hamlin. So now because I have a Hamlin in grave, if he does play a Resonator, I can just steal it. Choose to swing in for 4. Decides to take it, says that's fine. Seemingly goes down to 9 or 5 if we had not missed the Hamlin attack. Forcing him to swing in for the 8, seeing if we could possibly take him down to 1. Or force him to block with the Lucifer and kill it. Says that's fine, he'll take it, he'll go down to 1. It would have been lethal if we had both remembered to track again the Hamlin. I think we were moving a little bit too quick there. Missed the fact that I just swung in for 4 and just failed to record it. This is why tracking your own life is super important. Always keep very detailed notes as much as possible because it can pay off in the end. Playing Glint of Insight, he's declaring House, which I think is an interesting decision considering how I've revealed the Hamlin before. And then he's just going to use the Glint of Insight, like with the Remnant from having the mystery counters, to steal the Fenrir's Watchdog, leaving me with just Hamlin at that point. At that point, though, he only has 2 cards in hand. Going ahead and killing the Fenrir, but he knows that he only has no blocker. Like he doesn't have enough blockers, and I have 2 creatures, and the card in his hand doesn't do anything, so that ultimately is going to be the game. So he looks at his hand a little bit, looks at his rune deck, recognizing that he's already cast all 5, can't really do anything. Swings in for 8, I say that's fine, and then we go to my turn, and then the game is over. And so with that, we'll move on. Just draw a card, and then from that, we'll go on to game 2. As we transition to the next game here, please go ahead and check out the Patreon down below. It helps to go to support the channel with lots of cool perks. You can also buy Force of Will swag at the Ruler School spreadshirt down below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified when all of our videos goes live. Thank you guys so much, and let's go on to the next game. Going into game 2 here, Kenneth choosing to put me on the play, which I think is an interesting decision. I've seen a lot of players choosing to take draws, which I'm not entirely sure is the right decision. I mean, obviously it's probably matchup dependent, but I think in general, being able to be on the play is generally better. First turn, Dramaturgy into a first turn Gretel. Pretty solid start for my deck. Kenneth has to be careful if he decides to try to use Energize here, because he knows I have bounce stuff. Choosing to use the Look of Corruption, taking the Scarecrow, which I think is the right decision here. It's the kind of enabler, helps me get the Hamlins to the graveyard. No other turn on first turn. Gonna go ahead and play that Distortion of Time, so it can just sit in the graveyard up to this point. Ship a card away. Swing in for 2. So that's fine, I'll take it. Goes down to 38. Calls that stone, hits a mystery counter, Castle Stone. Cast the Skeleton Horde. And decides to burn the Energize for a Oborozuki. Do that play as before. Has this token and the 8/8 flyer. And I'm not entirely sure if I trust this play, knowing that the deck that he's playing against is a bounce deck. Because he's kind of sacrificing his stronger creatures for me to then just be able to bounce the thing that's being pumped up. Blocks with the token, I say that's fine. And then pass the turn there. See, I do have a Hamlin engrave at this point, but it's a matter of trying to get enough cards into my hand to make either find a way to discard it or get so many cards in my hand so that at the end of my turn I can discard. Which ultimately means I need to start the turn with 8 cards in my hand, and then start the turn post draw for turn with 8, and then anytime I play a card it has to replace itself. Playing that Ray the Black Owl. Choosing to pass the turn there, which I think is an interesting decision. Drawing for turn. Seeing that I drew that that Dragon Sword's Breath, I'm gonna do here is I'm kind of calculating some things, seeing if there's a way for me to get to not enough cards. I'm gonna go ahead and play Dragon Sword's Breath here with the Awakening to draw a card, but then Gretel's gonna let me draw another card. I'm gonna put the Oborozuki back in his hand and draw 2 cards here. Seeing another Dragon Sword's Breath to replace the first one, and a Misty Woods, which feels really good. Realizing that I'm 1 card short of being able to steal that 0 on this same turn. Get a little bit frustrated here. I'm 1 card or 1 will short, because I could use Invitation here, search for a card, go up to, play Forest of the Misty Woods, replace it for a Fairy Tale, and then discard at the end of turn, and still have 2 will to use the Misty Woods to steal that Ray. The other thing I note about Hamlin is he doesn't target. He just says Resonator your opponent controls chosen at random. So if you have Barrier or things like that, he gets around it. Playing that Distortion of Time. Trying to cycle into maybe a better card. Thinking about it, I go, you know what? I haven't looked at the top card. I say, you know what? Actually, let's go ahead and keep it. It's another Misty Woods. Let's just try to set up as many plays as possible to control this tempo. Do see a Scarecrow here, which feels very nice. But I'm still at 7 cards at the end of the turn. So for that, I have to pass. In response to the Ray trigger to try to put it back in his hand, I'm going to go ahead and do the Awakened to draw 2 cards and bounce it back to his hand. Main reason I waited rather than just trying to like swing in and potentially do it there is because I want to try to get as much card draw off as Gretel as possible. Pays 2. Asking if I'm tapped out. Pays 2 for a Ray. And then interestingly enough here makes the other play to cast Demon Division, tapping himself out. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with this play line. He's setting himself up to let me just kind of do whatever I want on my turn, which for a deck that likes to control tempo is exactly what we want to see. Any kind of resistance, you know, being able to do whatever we want, set up as many traps as we want for our opponent's turn without having to deal with potential repercussions or setbacks is really, really good. Playing the second Misty Woods here. Deciding to grab the house. And then at that point moving to end of turn and having to discard 2 cards due to hand size. Both of those cards are Hamlin's. Feels really good considering the fact that I have 2 Misty Woods on the field. So it goes to his turn. Can't do anything before upkeep. He's tapped out, recovers. Before he calls that stone, the trigger for 0 is going to go off. And in response to the trigger to 0, I'm going to crack the Misty Woods and steal it. So then when the trigger of 0 resolves, because it's hit that trigger, it'll flip over and now I have the 0 on my side of the field. So now with that targeted removal that he has, my field is now protected. Casts the Azazel. He has to choose the mode to draw 2, draw 2, and then send one of them to, pick up 2 cards, send one to grave, put in his hand, because 0 will cancel the effect if he tries to target any of my stuff. And I'm not entirely sure if I agree with this play from Kenneth either, knowing that I have a second Hamlet in the graveyard and the will to be able to cast a Misty Woods, because now he's essentially given me a 9/10 flyer. And he's about to be taking a lot of damage. Discards the Oborozuki, keeping the Look of Corruption. At the end of his turn, I'm going to go ahead and crack the Misty Woods, grab the other Hamlin, and steal his Azazel. See another Misty Woods in hand, which feels really good considering, again, he has no creatures on board, but he might have a board wipe. Lets me potentially bring back another Hamlin. Kind of explaining how the Misty Woods works here. Paying 1 to play the Misty Woods, getting to dig. Seeing another Hamlin. choosing to keep the rest of my cards in my hand because there's no reason for me to cast them right now. Oh, I think I might cast a Scarecrow here to get the advantage of the Gretel. And be able to get the other Hamlin to the graveyard. So draw 2. Discard. So I drew a Hamlin off the Scarecrow, which feels really nice. Swinging in here with everything that can attack. Dealing a total of 27 damage, taking him down to 11, which feels really good considering how it's just above $1,000. So Belial isn't cheaper for him. And then at end of turn, I have to discard due to hand size. And I can discard the 4th Hamlin. So now all 4 of my Hamlins are in the grave, ready to be abused as necessary. Tears of the Fallen, making me discard a card. Hitting a Jormungandr for my hand. Hasn't really been doing super much this game anyway. Been in pretty good control, haven't really necessarily needed it. Jormungandr is also a really good way to make sure Hamlin gets what you want because of his ability to RFG creatures on the field. Casts the Jet Black Wings. Decides to hold on to the Sandstorm and instead play the Black Rosario here, which is going to take over the 2 creatures that I stole from him. Spends his last will here. Casts Look of Corruption. See, that's fine. There's a house, a couple houses, a couple Dragon's Lord's Breath, a Jormungandr, and an Erendite. Says I'm going to take the Yorm. Then goes to my turn. Now here's a misplay that I make here. Keep in mind, Jet Black Wings says your opponent's Resonators gain -6 until end of turn. That is a cloud effect. So you're going to see here is you're going to see me at the end of his turn, knowing that I can try to push as much damage as possible and set up for lethal with those houses. You're going to see me crack for the Hamlin here at the end of turn. Shouldn't happen. It has to be cracked during my turn because otherwise that Hamlin will immediately die. Ultimately, because of what I do on my turn, it doesn't really matter. I would still kill him in the following turn if I had done it during my upkeep. But I just want to talk about that. Don't forget what cloud effects do to your stat lines and creatures that are cheated in. Learn from my mistakes, my misplays, both in game 1 and in game 2. Completely unintentional. But still important things to learn lesson-wise. Getting to play the Jormungandr here that I top decked, making it into the 9/9 creature that it is. He's tapped out. I haven't used it this game, and I have the ability to do so, so I'll go ahead and do God's Art of Distortion of Time, which means I get 2 free turns with him being completely tapped out, and then Hamlin and Yorm will be able to finish the game. So there you guys have it, and that is the match. Apologize for the errors in game 1 and game 2. Hope you guys can look past it, but also just see kind of what this deck is capable of. Obviously, Time Spinning, which is a very powerful blue deck, but I do think that Loki, with this kind of idea, has some possibilities. Be on the lookout for a feature match, hopefully back to regular schedule next week. We might take a week off due to the holidays, though, but other than that, hope you guys have a great weekend, and until next time, this is DMO73, signing off.